Hi, this is Danielle Peterson with Wild Soul Living. I'm here today to talk to you about chapter 8 in Women Who Run with the Wolves. I'm breaking down this book every month, chapter by chapter, and sharing some of my reflections, sharing some of my thoughts in this book that I do believe is the Wild Woman Bible, as someone in a book club that I belong to here in Denver had referenced, and just the best representation of this book that really speaks about the archetypal of the wild woman. So today my intention is to talk to you about chapter 8. This was a fairly long chapter, and so I'm going to divide it up in two parts because I typically like to keep my videos about 20 minutes. And so just to dive right in, I have to say that this is one of my favorite chapters in this entire book. It really speaks to me so profoundly, and how I really have identified as being a feral woman. And I had never really heard or used that phrase to describe a woman. And so Clarissa talks about it in her book, but then I also looked it up. And by definition, a feral woman is a woman who has been captured and imprisoned, lived in a freedom-starved place for so long that her original instincts, her intuitive knowing and how to live and be has been altered and damaged. So it's domestic turned wild. So that really spoke to me. And then I took it a step farther and I looked into the Webster dictionary, and they broke down feral into three different meanings. The first is, and I'm reading off of my screen now, feral means existing in a wild or untamed state, which is similar to the definition that I just spoke about. The second meaning is having returned to an untamed state from domestication. And then three, of or suggestive of a wild animal, a savage, would be the three possible definitions of the feral woman. And so Clarissa is really speaking about the feral being a woman that has been captured and imprisoned, and they had come from a freedom starve, or as she says, a soul famine begins to happen, and her intuitive knowing goes at the wayside, and she becomes trapped and soul starved, and in that soul starved state, she gets like addictive, like she is no longer observant to the society, observant to the ways, and acts out in what is the right word, almost like a mad savage in a civilized society that eventually harms her, and she has to literally, in the story in the Red Shoes, cut off parts of herself from the world, because you can't coexist as a feral woman in our society. And that's part of the reason why this chapter spoke to me so much, because for me personally, the last 7 years, I've been really tapping in and really embracing this notion of being wild and being a wild woman, and identify with being soul starved. I've never used that word before, and how I'm having to catch myself in not becoming a feral woman, but still letting my wildness come through. And I love how Clarissa breaks down in the second half about all these entrapments, and we'll kind of break those down in the next video. But today's video, what I wanted to do is talk about the story itself of the red shoes and kind of set some context. And then so next week we will go into all the different, I think there's 8 different entrapments, so we'll go through all of those. All right, and so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be breaking down the beginning parts of this book, and I'll be referencing page numbers. And I just want you to know there's a lot of different revisions to the book, so if I'm referencing a page number and you can't find it on that specific page, just go a little bit to the front or the back and you should be able to find it. So let's go ahead and begin. And so, as I already stated, my own journey is reading this chapter is that this idea of realizing that I have been captured has taken place, and how in that capturing of what seemed like the time making my life easier or more secure, more safe, what happened to me is a soul famine followed. And for me, I was celibate for many, many years. I was a doer for society, and I was not in touch with myself. And then what happened, I started reclaiming my wild and going out in nature by myself, and just immersing myself in the earth. And I'm just now getting to a place of accepting that I had been captured, because I stayed in my marriage, but I had almost 2 separate lives in this wild woman life, and this married life that was no marriage, but it had some conveniences for my family and then also for my finances. And now I'm in a place where I need to get fully uncaptured. And I often, if I don't do this notion of being a fair woman, I might indeed cripple my existence, just like in the story. And so this chapter really touched my being, and how my own natural instincts of luxury and my own denials of that I have been captured is fully realized in this book. And I don't want to choose to live as a feral woman in a life of disability. I want to embrace all of me, and not the fear of not being able to live, as Clarissa says, a handmade life, not to have to rely on other people to bring me the luxuries that I feel I deserve. And in the book, I really appreciate how Clarissa explains, and this is a quote: "Without firm participation with the wild nature, a woman starves and falls into obsession of feel-betters, or leave me alone, or love me, please." And Estes adds in this quote, "The way to hold on to what we have, the way to find our way back to the wild feminine, is to see what mistakes a woman so trapped can make. They can be backtracked and repaired, and that we can have reunion." So it gives me hope in reading the stories that I can see more fully the errors in my ways, and that I feel like I'm at a choice point. Do I want to live as a Pharaoh woman, or do I want to escape my own capture that I chose? So that was a lot of personal shares. And so now I'm going to get into bigger, deeper aspects of the book. And so just macro view of this chapter is, to me, I see this chapter is a discussion of what she calls seduction of luxury and the traps on that may lead to excessive addictions from one's natural gifts. And in the story of the red shoes, it's about staying true to your own handmade life, because the girl in the story of the red shoes, she had these handmade red shoes. She was poor, and this older woman approaches her in a carriage and invites her in and takes her in as her own. And she burns her handmade red shoes, and then she says, you deserve the luxuries in life, let's go shopping. And she goes shopping and she buys all these nice clothes, and the little girl sneaks in a pair of red shoes because she loved her handmade red shoes. And she knew that in the old woman's church that the red shoes is not acceptable, but she snuck them in anyway. And because she knew that the old woman did not have the best of eyesight. And the whole story is quite fascinating because even the shopkeeper knew what the little girl was doing and gave her kind of a wink, hey, we'll go ahead and slide these red shoes, even though that they're forbidden in the church, in the society that she lived in. And it's just, there's a lot of symbolisms in the story, with the color red, and how the new red shoes speaks to her loss of her own handmade shoes, and how it can represent her self-design life or a more tame life now that she can't fully make her own anymore. Everything has to be bought, which leads to a loss of accurate perception, which leads to excess, to the nicer things, which leads to her to lose her feet eventually in the story, the very platform she stands on. And what I mean by that in the story, what happens, so and as I mentioned before, the little girl gets brand new clothes, brand new red shoes, goes to church with the old woman, and everyone is staring because how dare the little girl wear red shoes to church. And the people in the community tell on her that she is wearing red shoes to the old lady, and the old lady forbids her from wearing them again. And the little girl honors her for a bit, but sees the red shoes on the shelf and puts them on anyway. She just can't resist the red shoes, even though she knows that they're bad, and that in the community that she lives in, are the color red in church is considered evil. And the little girl, still knowing all this, she still can't help herself. She still wants to wear the red shoes, and she does. And eventually, the red shoes starts dancing her. And to me, it's a symbolism of her losing control in her own need for what she wants, and becoming, at that point, she becomes a Pharaoh woman where she wants what she wants, and it doesn't matter. And then eventually, with excess and addiction, the red shoes starts dancing and uncontrollably. And then finally the little girl begs to have the shoes removed, and she can't take them off. And at the very end of the story, she has her feet literally cut off so she could finally get rid of those red shoes, which is quite ironic. So it's the very platform, she had to get rid of the very platform that she stood upon. And there's just so many great metaphors and paradoxes in the story, and the color red and monarchy and feet. And I'm not going to go over all of those, but I do encourage you to dive into that, because there's a lot of symbolism with shoes in particular. And for me, the story, it just really speaks of how this we can be caught into the famine of the wild soul. And without a firm participation with our own wild nature, a woman can literally starve and falls into an obsession of feel betters, leave me alone, love me please. And that's what the red shoes were to this girl that used to hand make her shoes. And she was in touch with her wild self. And then she was captured by the woman and denied to have her red shoes, and how this starving of that creates this animal in her, to be obsessed with these red shoes. So the girl who danced out of control, who basically lost her footing and lost her feet, begins to maybe perhaps understand in this fairy tale how there's so much value and wisdom in that. And in the destruction of traps and cages, and how that can make us do crazy things. They say animals in a zoo, domesticated wild animals in a zoo, they don't eat the same, they don't mate the same. And even though the zookeepers and the people that care for them, they treat them humanely and they love them. But you take something out of the wild and you domesticate them, they can become feral. And so for me, doing this work with my wild woman and spending months and months out in the wilderness, and to come back into a civilized society, if I don't connect with my wild nature, the possibility that certain obsessive instincts are not managed with my wild, and if I don't listen and learn and go and connect with both, I might really do some critical damage. Literally, she had to have her feet cut off because she lost her instinctive nature, that the wild still lives with us, and that no amount of luxuries can replace that. So I'm going to go into deeper aspects of the book. Let's see. Yeah, so the rewards were great with this young girl. She seemingly has progressed. She had these handmade red shoes that and she was poor and she lived in the wild, and seemingly she had progressed from having no shoes to these great new shoes. But in spite of all the newness and the luxuries, the difficulties of living a soulful life still existed. And so her shoes represent literally an enormous and literal step toward integration of a resourceful feminine nature in day-to-day life. Like, so how do you bring your wild nature in day-to-day life? How do you learn to hand make your life even when it's imperfect, to find your joy, to continue to evolve? And so on page 222, let's see, says in archetypal symbolism, feet represent mobility and freedom. In that sense, has shoes to cover the feet is to have the conviction of our belief and the wherewithal to act on them. Without psychic shoes, a woman is unable to negotiate inner or outer environments that require acuity, sense, caution, and toughness. So it's this idea that life and sacrifice go together, and how red is the color of life and sacrifice. To live a vibrant life, we must make this sacrifice of various sorts. So again, in page 222, says, problems arise when there is much sacrifice, but no life forthcoming from it. Then red is the color of blood loss rather than blood life. This is exactly what occurs in the tale. One sort of vibrant and beloved red is lost when the child's handmade red shoes are burned. This sets a yearning, an obsession, and finally an addiction to the other kind of red, the one of fast-breaking, cheap thrills, sex without soul, the one that leads to a life without meaning. So it's what I spoke to today, but there's where I came to those conclusions from direct quotes in the book. And so I'm going to go ahead and pause there. You got the breakdown and the gist of the story. And the next session, what I'm going to talk to you guys about is the traps. And there's a total of, I think there's 8. There's 8 different traps. And so I'm going to go ahead and break those down for the next video. So please subscribe to my channel to ensure that you get notifications for my upcoming videos. And I will see you all soon. And feel free to check out my Facebook page, Wild Soul Community. I have a group page, and then also my Facebook, Wild Soul Living. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.